Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, I want to remind everybody at the beginning, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. All right, this episode is going to be a little bit of shifting gears from what I've been covering the past couple of weeks because, first off, I need to take a little bit of a break from covering straight politics. It's been kind of an intense couple of weeks. Second of all, it's been a minute since I've done an episode like this where I deconstruct a written piece. And third of all, I finally found a piece that richly deserves to be deconstructed. Today we're going to be talking about the Heather Heying piece on Toxic Femininity from Quillette. But just as kind of just as a lead up into this, I want to go ahead and give you the Wikipedia definition of toxic masculinity. And it goes as such because it's going to matter when we get to talking about toxic femininity. But here is the Wikipedia definition of toxic masculinity. The concept of toxic masculinity is used in psychology and gender studies to refer to certain norms of masculine behavior that are associated with harm to society and to men themselves. Traditional stereotypes of men as socially dominant, along with related traits such as misogyny and homophobia, can be considered toxic due to the promotion of violence, including sexual assault and domestic violence. Scholars argue that the socialization of boys often normalizes violence, such as the line saying boys will be boys with regard to bullying and aggression. Self-reliance and emotional repression are correlated with increased physiological problems in men such as depression, increased stress, and substance abuse. Toxic masculine traits are characteristic of the unspoken code of behavior among men in American prisons, where they exist in part as a response to the harsh conditions of prison life. Other traditionally masculine traits such as devotion to work, pride in excelling at sports, and providing for one's family are not considered to be toxic. The concept was originally used by authors associated with the mythophobic men's movement, in contrast to a real or deep masculinity that they say men have lost touch with in modern society. Now, I wanted to give the original definition of toxic masculinity because I wanted to point out that under the original definition, the idea of toxic masculinity was dealing with the idea of violence and of emotional repression. And so I say this and just kind of put a pin in it because we're going to explore kind of how this has evolved and changed into meaning something other than what it was originally intended to mean. And then also before I get into deconstructing the piece, personal thoughts. I mean, obviously, I like men. Obviously, if I didn't like men, I certainly would have picked the wrong political ideology to be associated with if I had a problem with men. But overall, the whole concept of toxic masculinity is really just stupid to me, at least as it's defined today. The original definition I can understand, but as it is used today, it just strikes me as really fucking dumb and just needs to go away. But we'll discuss that a little bit once we get into the piece. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the piece itself. The title of it is On Toxic Femininity by Heather Heying, which, yes, this is the Heather Heying of the intellectual dark web / Evergreen State College fiasco fame. And this is on Quillette, which generally tends to host content like this from intellectual dark web types and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't really have a problem with Quillette, but obviously I do have a problem with this piece, and we're going to discuss it. So let's go ahead and just start getting into this. Male lions can be monsters, murderous and focused, toxic, if you will. Given the opportunity, male lions will kill the kittens in a pride over which they have gained control. They commit infanticide, which brings the new mothers, freshly childless, back into estrus. The females are quickly impregnated. Thus, we can all agree, is disturbing behavior and may make some people feel rather less pleased with lions. Given the opportunity, the vast majority of modern human males would do no such thing. Okay, just as a brief moment and aside here, and one of the reasons I make a big deal about who wrote this piece is, if I did not tell you, would you not think this is the beginning of a Jordan Peterson piece? Like, does this not, like, his tone, like, his style of writing, like, is this a thing that they're doing in the intellectual dark web now? Is we're just all aping Peterson's style? Anyway, moving on. Those who would argue that men are inherently toxic are, ironically, making arguments that are biologically essentialist, and they are making them badly at that. Evolution built humans as it did lions, but humans have longer childhoods and greater generational overlap, share more ideas with greater complexity, and usually live in more stable social groups than do lions. In humans, evolution has given us the capacity to shape personality during development to a greater degree than in any other species. As such, and because few human cultures would tolerate such behavior, the vast majority of men would not and could not kill babies nor rape their grieving mothers. Wow! Holy shit! We are setting the bar low for you, gentlemen. I mean, I guess, we can assume that you guys would not kill babies and then rape their mothers. I guess. I don't know. But I'm just like, wow, this is your intro? Like, this is the conflation you're making between, like, toxic masculinity and the fact that lions will kill babies so that their mothers will want to get pregnant again. Like, what? This is where you start out. Like, that's wow. Just wow. Okay, moving on. Over 30 years ago, I came of age as a female in LA. Being a young woman in LA means being watched. Watched for deviations from the norm, for indications of future fame, for signs of weakness. Watched simply for how one looks. Women are watched simply for how one looks everywhere. That's not just an LA thing. There are, unfortunately, many examples, recent and not, that point to LA's most famous industry as being a place where young women need to be on guard. I never aspired to the industry, but even just living in LA, the culture is omnipresent. Okay, I've never been to LA, so I'm gonna need some of you guys who have been to LA or some of my LA peeps out there. Did she just conflate, like, the Harvey Weinsteins of the world to, like, every dude in LA? Like, I'm sorry, is there a culture that is permissive of men, at best, being sexually creepy towards women? At worst, outright raping women or jerking off into a potted plant next to a woman? Some kind of thing that's tolerated in LA? Because I'm pretty sure it's not. So this, again, like, just wow. Like, you're really, damn. Just shit. I guess screw all you dudes. I don't know. Back to the piece. 2 anecdotes should suffice. Walking alone in my sun-kissed West LA neighborhood. I hate the term sun-kissed. Can we get rid of it? Like, unless you're talking about the soda, just nix it. But walking alone in my sun-kissed West LA neighborhood one summer, I was approached by a man looking for extras for a beach scene in a movie. Before I had said a word, he told me where to go, how much I would be paid per day, and what would be expected of me. That I stand around in a bikini amongst others similarly clad. I told him I was going to college. He literally looked me up and down, adopted a frown, and assured me that I did not need to go to college. Beach scenes were my future, and from there, who can say? Better beach scenes, presumably. Okay, setting aside the idea that is there something about being in a bikini in a movie and going to college that's mutually incompatible that you can't do both? I mean, just this whole situation is like, this is benign. Like, this is nothing. It's like, okay, so you're walking down the street and Mr. Movie Man walks up to you and says, hey, I think you should be in my bikini movie. This is where you need to be, and this is how much you're going to get paid, and blah, 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 blah. And you tell Mr. Movie Man, no, I'm sorry, dude. I'm not interested in being in your movie. I'm going to college. And Mr. Movie Man says, well, that's a shame. I really think you should be in beach scenes. And you say, well, I feel differently. And the conversation ends. Like, I'm sorry, what is so bad about this conversation? I imagine it happens a lot in LA, but there's no threat here. There's nothing. A dude asked you to be in a movie and you politely declined. Like, what's the big fucking deal here? Alright, returning to the piece. Second anecdote. One of my many part-time jobs in high school, along with scooping ice cream and renting out VHS tapes, was staffing high-end catering events. Dressed in classic tailored black and white, I carried platters of hors d'oeuvres around during cocktail hour and ferried plated entrees during table service. At indoor events, male attendees would often stop me to engage in small talk and ask for my number. I wish they wouldn't, but I felt no risk. One night, though, I worked an event on the backlot of the Universal Studios. A group unaffiliated with Hollywood had booked it for a no expense spared fete, and I was to do the usual, except I would have to cover more ground. The kitchen was further away, the guests spent more time spread more out, with no walls to contain them. Before table service, my coworkers and I made the rounds with our platters of bruschetta and cured meats. On this Hollywood backlot, though, the lack of walls proved dangerous. A young man, older than me but younger than 30, maneuvered me away from the crowd. There were many shadows and he stood too close. He looked at me with predatory eyes. He backed me into a hedge, rubbed up against me, and then I got away from him before it went any further. This was toxic masculinity before the phrase existed. Alright, let's just go ahead and scroll all the way back to the beginning of this. Okay, so guys who I would presume are less than sober wanted to make small talk with you and ask you for your number, like, okay, that's probably annoying, but that's not toxic masculinity. That's just people trying to be nice and maybe trying to get your number. Like, okay, so they tried and you turned them down. Like, as long as it didn't go anywhere beyond that, there's no big fucking deal there. As far as the second one's concerned, I'm like, okay, what is this maneuvering you from a crowd? Like, what do? Grab you by the shoulders and, like, push you into the bush? Like, what? Like, I don't understand, like, this whole maneuvering and shadows and predatory eyes. And it's like, okay, so, but still, that's a worse situation. But you got yourself out of the situation with no physical damage to yourself. And I would be remiss if I didn't just... the writing on this paragraph. Like, what is this writing? Like, this is not the fucking Great Gatsby. This is you describing your, like, summer jobs. Like, what is this language? Like, what is going on here? And then to equate both of those with toxic masculinity, and that's why I wanted to start this off with the definition of toxic masculinity, because neither one of these situations comes even close to the definition of toxic masculinity. So I don't know. If you're going to bitch about toxic masculinity being misused, which she does later on in the piece, don't misuse it yourself. Like, don't apply it to situations that it doesn't warrant and then bitch about other people applying it to situations that don't warrant it. Actually, on the topic of misusing toxic masculinity, let's go back to the piece. Yes, toxic masculinity exists, but the use of the term has been weaponized. It has been hurled without care at every man. When it emerged, the use seemed merely imprecise. In most groups of people, there's some guy waiting for an opportunity to fondle a woman's ass without her consent, put his hand where he shouldn't, right? That's who was being outed as toxic. Those men, and far, far worse, do exist, obviously. But wait, does every human assemblage contain such men? It does not. This term, toxic masculinity, is being wielded indiscriminately and with force. We are not talking imprecision now, we're talking thoroughgoing inaccuracy. Yes, we are talking about thoroughgoing inaccuracy, Heather, because you just did it. And, I mean, this kind of goes to my whole thing about toxic masculinity, and there are parts of this piece, I will say, that I do agree with, and I will give credit when credit's due, but don't, like I said, don't bitch about people misusing the phrase toxic masculinity right after you misuse the phrase toxic masculinity. Alright, back to the piece. Most men are not toxic. Their maleness does not make them toxic any more than one's whiteness makes one racist. Assume for the moment that we can agree on terms. Is maleness more highly correlated with toxic masculinity than is femaleness? Yes. Ipso facto, the term is about maleness, so men will display more of it than will women. The logical leap is then concluding that all men are toxic. The very communities where toxic masculinity is being discussed most are the communities where the men are, in my experience, compassionate, egalitarian, and not at all toxic. Calling good men toxic does everyone a deep disservice. Everyone except those who seek empowerment through victim narratives. Okay, I agree about the victim narrative thing, but here's... Let me scroll back to the whole idea of the logical leap that is apparently a logical leap, which no, it's not. If I told you I have 3 cats, one of my cats is black. If you didn't turn around and said, all of my cats are black, I'd be like, no, I just told you that they are not. Same way if you extrapolate this to humans. If I pointed to a group of 5 dudes and said, those 5 dudes over there, one of them sexually assaulted a woman, and then you tell me, that means that they're all rapists, I'd be like, no, I just told you only one is. So the whole idea of applying toxic masculinity to every man, because some men, that does not hold up under any kind of logical scrutiny. And she kind of just leaves it off there, so I don't know if she was trying to make the same point that I'm making. But if she did, she didn't really follow it up the way I just followed it up, so I'm not I'm not entirely sure where she was going with that. Anyway, moving on. For the record, I am not suggesting that actual victims do not exist, nor that they do not deserve full emotional, physical, legal, medical, and other support. I also do not want to minimize the fact that most women, perhaps even all, have experienced unpleasantness from a subset of men. But not all women are victims. And even among those women who have truly suffered at the hands of men, most, I would hazard to guess, do not want their status in the world to be victims. Okay, I mean, if I was editing this piece, I would probably just get rid of this whole paragraph because it serves no purpose. It's like you're not adding anything to the conversation here. Yes, we know that there are victims of sexual violence. Yes, we can be assured that most of them probably don't want to be labeled as victims. I mean, I can turn around and say the same thing, that perhaps most men have experienced unpleasantness from a subset of women. Like, there's no monopoly on being an asshole as far as what genitalia you have. So I don't understand the whole point of this paragraph at all. But that paragraph does lead us into the part of this that I really have a problem with. So let's go ahead and go back to the piece. All of which leads us directly to a topic not much discussed: toxic femininity. Sex and gender roles have been formed over hundreds of thousands of years in human evolution, indeed over hundreds of millions of years in our animal lineage. Aspects of these roles are in rapid flux, but ancient truths still exist. Historical appetites and desires persist. Straight men will look at beautiful women, especially if those women are A, young and hot, and B, actively displaying. Display invites attention. Alright, so most of you could probably already figure out where I'm going to go with this, but I do want to back this up for a second. As far as the idea of sex and gender roles, yes, they have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, and a thing that I see when everybody makes this argument is everyone seems to forget that there was a time in human evolution where society was matriarchal. It wasn't always patriarchal. It's evolved to that. And it's like this idea that gender roles have always kind of been like, men have always been considered like superior to females. Like, that's not evolutionarily true. That's not societally true. There have been matriarchal societies. There have been societies where even like family lines are traced through the women, because obviously if you're looking at a child, you don't ever really know who their father is, but you know who the mother is, because you know like whose vagina the baby popped out of. Like, you know who the mom of the baby is. And so like patriarchal societies where everything's kind of traced through the male line is fairly recent as far as like human evolution is concerned. But to get to the problematic part of this paragraph, it's the last sentence. Display invites attention. I mean, I've got a couple of further points down where I want to make some points on this, but there is a difference between like respectful attention and disrespectful attention. Like, if I'm out and I see an attractive man, like, I might look for like a beat longer than I would look at anybody else, but I don't feel the need to like yell at him at vulgar language, like the things I would like to do with him. Like, there's a difference between being like not gross about it and being gross about it. And I know there are some feminists now who I've kind of tried to make this to where like any kind of male attention is bad, and that's ridiculous. I mean, that's fucking bullshit. But to not acknowledge that there are various forms of like different kinds of ways that you can express attraction to somebody it minimizes the argument a bit, in my opinion. Moving on. Hotness amplifying femininity puts on full display, advertising fertility and urgent sexuality. Which, I'm sorry, every time I read urgent sexuality, all I can hear in my brain is the Foreigner song Urgent, so I have an earworm, and now you do too. It invites male attention by, for instance, revealing flesh or painting on signs of sexual reciprocity. This, I would argue, is inviting trouble. No, I did not just say she was asking for it. I did, however, just say that she was displaying herself, and of course she was going to get looked at. Again, there's a respectful and a disrespectful way to express to somebody that you find them attractive. But here's something that, like, I've the first time I encountered this idea was obviously during the Jordan Peterson Vice interview. But where did this idea come from that putting makeup on your face as a woman is somehow like displaying some kind of level of like sexual like receptivity, I guess? Is that even a word? Did she make up a word? Did I just make up a word? But like I was looking at my face before I filmed this, and I still have on my makeup from today, and I'm pretty sure I don't look like I'm like inviting someone to come fuck me right now. I mean, right now I probably look a little sweaty because I'm sitting here in a closet talking to myself, but this whole idea that like women put on makeup to express some like sexual readiness, like, or to like enhance like it, she says it like later on in the piece, and I heard Jordan Peterson say it, that is like you're making up your face to make it look like you're about to orgasm. And I'm like, I've never done that a day in my life. And I've been wearing makeup for almost like 20 years now. And so like, where did this concept come from? Like where does this even come in? Like what, and I'm assuming this applies solely to like putting on like specific blushes or specific like red lipsticks. And it's like, well, what happens if you just do like a smoky eye and a nude lip? Or what if you're just like highlighting and contouring? Like, did this display some kind of like sexual readiness too? Or is it just like red lipstick and blush? All right, but moving back to the piece, and this is the paragraph that when I first read it, just made me want to throw my phone into a volcano and walk away and just forget that the internet exists. The amplification of hotness is not in and of itself toxic, although personally I don't respect it and never have. Hotness fades, wisdom grows, wise young women will invest accordingly. Femininity becomes toxic when it cries foul, chastising men for responding to a provocative display. All right. Can we just take a slight detour moment here for me to vent about something that I thought this trope was dead and gone and was just relegated back to second wave feminism, although the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking it's actually more entrenched than ever, is this idea that as a woman, you can be either sexually attractive or intelligent. And you have to pick one and completely forsake the other. Can we please stop that? Like, it is entirely possible to be a sexy woman and also be an intelligent woman. It's easy to be an intelligent woman and be a sexy woman. Like, you can do both at the exact same time. You don't have to pick and choose one. And the thing that bothers me is it plays into that whole idea that if you're sexy or sexually attractive, you're dumb. But if you want to be taken seriously as a smart girl, you have to completely desexualize yourself, which I think that concept I want to explore a little further. I want to think about that a little more because I'm thinking that might be one of the seeds of why there's so much like sexual weirdness now, especially amongst women. But like I said, I want to sit down and think about that a little more. But as far as that whole trope of you have to pick one and that you can't be a sexual person and also be an intelligent person, that needs to fucking stop. Like, come on, man. We're past that. Like, we've moved past that, or at least I thought we did. But if we haven't, we need to. Right. All right. Moving on. Back to the piece. Where we set our boundaries is a question about which reasonable people may disagree, but two bright lines are widely agreed upon. Every woman has the right not to be touched if she does not wish to be, and coercive quid pro quo, in which sexual favors are demanded for the possibility of career advancement, is unacceptable. But when women doll themselves up in clothes that highlight sexually selected anatomy, and put on makeup that hints at an impending orgasm, it is toxic. Yes, toxic to demand that men do not look, do not approach, do not query. All right, here we are again. What? Somebody please explain to me that the whole putting on makeup to make yourself look like you're about to come thing. Somebody please explain it to me. Like, where did this idea come from outside of Jordan Peterson in a Vice interview? But this whole, like, okay, this kind of smacks of like CYA, like the beginning of this paragraph for the end of this paragraph. Because pointing out that, yes, of course, women have bodily autonomy. And yes, of course, people should not violate that bodily autonomy, either by straight up like violating your personal space or making you feel like you are in a position where you have to give up your bodily autonomy to get where you want career-wise. Doesn't cover for the second half of this paragraph, where you basically slam women for, I guess, just, I don't know, dressing in a certain way. But I mean, it's like, I don't work in a corporate environment, so I don't have this problem, but I know in a lot of corporate environments, you are expected to look a certain way. And when I say that, I don't mean that you're supposed to look like sexual or anything like that, but you are expected to have like a neat, clean, tidy appearance. Like, you can't just show up in like a sackcloth or a muumuu or some shit with your hair everywhere and like no makeup on. Like, you're expected to look nice at work. And sometimes, I mean, I've seen what is available for women who have to wear like actual like business attire to work, and a lot of it is somewhat form-fitting. So, I mean, if you have boobs and a butt, like, it's going to be a little hard to disguise the fact that you've got boobs and a butt. I mean, like, I usually wear t-shirts and jeans to work, and I still, you can tell, I have boobs and a butt. Like, there's no hiding that fact. Like, I don't get this. Like, what is it exactly that you're implying that these women should do? And again, I do agree that this whole idea of expecting men to like never approach women ever, ever, ever is completely ridiculous. But I think trying to slap that onto the end of this is kind of like it's like the like, I'm trying to think of the right words for it. You know how when you're supposed to like give constructive criticism to someone, like you say something positive at the beginning and then you say something positive at the end, but you put all the negative in the middle? That's this paragraph. Like, that's what she tried to do in this paragraph. And I see you, Heather. I see what you did there. Right, as I'm sure you can tell, we're well into the part of the piece that I have issues with. So let's try to kind of like get through this, because I know this is starting to run kind of long and there's still a lot of things that I want to discuss. So anyway, back to the piece. Young women have vast sexual power. Everybody who's being honest with themselves knows this. Women in their sexual prime who are anywhere near the beauty norms for their culture have a kind of power that no one else has. I don't disagree with that at all. And that's kind of one of my arguments about the patriarchy argument, is that to make that argument, you would have to ignore the fact that women hold a vast amount of power over men. Especially if you are a young, attractive woman. Like, even men, even like the most attractive man in the world, you are not going to come close to the power that attractive women have. Like, you're not going to touch it. Back to the piece. They are also all but certain to lack the wisdom to manage it. Toxic femininity is an abuse of that power, in which hotness is maximized and victim status is then claimed when straight men don't treat them as peers. Okay. Now, here's my thing. Why should it be incumbent upon me, or any other woman for that matter, to arrange my physical appearance in order to be taken seriously by a man? Like, that's not on her. That's on him. Like, there's nothing you can do that's going to influence somebody else's opinion of you. And if you're dealing with men who can't quite wrap their heads around the fact that you can be an attractive woman and also be taken seriously on an intellectual level, I don't know what else to say but to associate with better men. Like, I've got nothing else for you. I mean, if it's in a workplace, I don't know what to tell you. But I mean, there's just nothing you can do about that. Like, to claim victim status because men don't take you seriously, like, there is something valid to that. Like, if you've got a group of men who are refusing to take you seriously because of the way you look, that is a valid complaint. That's not really claiming victimhood status. And as far as quote-unquote maximizing hotness, who said that's what any of them are doing in the first place? Like, you have to put on certain clothes to go to work or to go outside or to do whatever. And sometimes some of this stuff has nothing to do with anybody other than your own personal self. Maybe a woman decided to put on red lipstick that day because she thought it looked cute. Maybe a woman is wearing a certain outfit because she's feeling herself that day. Like maybe you've been hitting the gym, you've lost a couple pounds, you're feeling good about yourself. Or maybe she's just not been feeling all that good about herself and is trying to like boost yourself up. Like there's reasons that women do things. Amazingly enough, as wonderful, complex creatures as we are, there are reasons that we do things that have nothing to do with men or the male gaze or anything outside of our own personal selves. Like, is that hard to understand? Like, why would you promote like this retrograde notion that women need to organize themselves and their physical appearance in their life around what even like strange men, like strangers, will think of you? Like, that's so, what? Like, what the fuck? Like, why would I look in my closet in the morning or look in my makeup bin and be like, well, gee, I want to get dressed today, but my God, I certainly don't want to attract the wrong kind of male attention, so let me put on this instead of that. Like, that's where that line of thought leads, and that's where I have a problem with it. Is now you're infringing upon somebody's individual rights to do what they want to do with their body. Like, why do I need to take any of this into consideration instead of just expecting men to not be assholes? Like, that's my whole argument against that. It's like, it's not incumbent upon me to organize my life to make sure that somebody else isn't an asshole. Okay, moving on, because we gotta hurry up and get through this piece because I'm just getting increasingly more and more pissed off at it. Creating hunger in men by actively inviting the male gaze. Again, who the fuck said anybody is actively inviting any fucking thing? By actively inviting the male gaze, then demanding that men have no such hunger, that is toxic femininity. Subjugating men, emasculating them when they display strength, physical, intellectual, or other, that is toxic femininity. Insisting that men, simply by virtue of being men, are toxic, and then acting surprised as relationships between men and women become more strained, that is toxic femininity. It is a game, the benefits of which go to a few while the costs are shared by us all. Again, oh my God. Am I going to make it through this whole piece without breaking this damn phone? I certainly hope so. I'm not ready to buy a new one yet. But it's just, why is it being all put on women to fix gender relations? And you're still not understanding toxic masculinity. That's not what toxic masculinity is. Stop it. And I mean, as far as like subjugating men and emasculating them, like, okay, yeah, some women take it that far. Most of us have some goddamn sense in our head. And it's just this, okay, moving on. I had a student on one of my study abroad trips who had a perennial problem with clothing. She was never wearing enough of it. She was smart, athletic, and beautiful, but also intent on advertising hotness at all moments. How many times is this woman going to use the word hot or hotness? Come on. It's starting to sound like sour grapes at this point. At a field station in a jungle in Latin America, she approached me to complain that the local men were looking at her. The rest of us were wearing field gear, a distinctly unrevealing and unsexy garb. She was in a swimsuit. Put on more clothes, I told her. She was aghast. She wanted me to change the men, to talk to them about where to point their eyes. Here in their home, where we were visitors, and one of the gringos had showed up nearly naked, she wanted the men to change. Holy shit. Okay, first of all, way to pick like the most gratuitous example that I'm sure you could possibly think of to try to make your point. Second of all, like, did you really just like, okay, look at us. We're being unsexy. That makes us better. Like, stop it. Did you really just use the word gringo? Did you really just... Oh my God. Just this whole paragraph, just like the lack of self-awareness here is insane. Okay. Starting to run really, really long. I'm going to try to speed this up. For a spell before that, my job was to trek around tropical forests studying poison frogs. I was interested in their sex lives and figuring out how they choose their mates in their territories, and how they parent and what that meant about the evolution of society more generally. My research revealed, in part, how many different ways there are to be territorial and to be successful in male frogs. In Madagascan poison frogs, there are multiple routes to success, both naturally and sexually selected. Males can succeed evolutionary by holding high-quality territories, and they can also succeed by having no territories at all, but by being rather more sneaky. Wide variance in strategies and shifting strategies under different conditions is well studied by animal behavior and game theory. Given that we know this to be true in non-human animals, why would we expect that humans are less rather than even more flexible? There are many ways to be female and many ways to be male, and some of each are bad news for everybody but the individual employing them. As a social species that has become the dominant ecological force on our planet, we can and should aspire to behave in ways that are not merely selfish, not merely competitive, but also collaborative. Toxic masculinity and toxic femininity are inherently selfish modes, and those not employing them should be interested in seeing them eradicated. Listen, you want to eliminate toxic masculinity and toxic femininity? Here's an idea. Stop calling people toxic. Stop labeling people you don't know. How about that? How about looking at people as individuals and not as a group of people to be labeled toxic? That might go a long way towards doing it. All right. Trying to get to the end of this piece now. The movement that has popularized the term toxic masculinity shares tools and conclusions with those who see signs of white supremacy everywhere they look. Intersectionalists have in common with one another a particular rhetorical trick. Any claim made by a member of a historically oppressed group is unquestionably true. Questioning claims is itself an act of oppression. Okay, so doesn't mean that you can't do it. This opens the door for anyone who is willing to lie to obtain power. If you cannot question claims, any claim can be made. Thus, racism is ubiquitous, and all men are toxic. I object, but objection is not allowed. Again, says who? You can object to whatever the hell you want. I would think that she, of all people, would know that. Everyone who understands game theory knows how the game ends. Innocent people being vilified with false claims and exposed to witch hunts. Sexual assault is real, but that does not mean all claims of sexual assault are honest. That is true. Not every claim of sexual assault is honest, and you don't have to automatically believe, you don't have to believe all women. You don't have to believe everything that comes out of a woman's mouth just because it came out of a woman's mouth. Like, everybody should be held to the same standards as far as, like, legally speaking, morally speaking, socially speaking. Everybody should be held to the same standards. So if you're not going to say, just agree with everything that comes out of a man's mouth, you shouldn't agree with everything that just comes out of a woman's mouth. Like, it doesn't, being a woman doesn't add, like, special gravitas to what you have to say, and it doesn't automatically make the things that are coming out of your mouth true. Last paragraph. We're almost there, folks. It is shocking that this bears saying, but there is a world of men who are smart and compassionate and eager to have vibrant, surprising conversations with other people, both men and women. The sex-specific toxicity that I've seen, where it has been obvious, has mostly been in the other court. All men are toxic and all women victims? No, not in my name. Okay, I absolutely believe the statement that there are men out there who are happy to have wonderful, fascinating, vibrant, sparkling, wonderful conversations with all sorts of people. But did you not just spend a good chunk of this essay making the argument that somehow hotness like short wires men's brains and makes them unable to do things like think and talk to attractive women without, like, I don't know, completely losing their shit? Like, I agree that men, I give a lot more credit to men than most feminists do, because I like you guys. Like, I understand that you guys can, like, do more than one thing at a time. Like, you can see a woman as sexually attractive and also see her as intelligent. Like, I give you guys that credit because I know you guys can. I know a lot of you. Like, I've seen you do it. But this whole, like, you just made a whole argument that that's not even possible, and now you want to say, oh, but, well, it is. Well, like, no, not all men are toxic. No, not all women are victims. That is true. Why even make this fucking essay if that's where you're gonna end it? Because you just disproved everything you fucking said. Like, oh my god. So this... Okay, we've reached the end of the piece. We finally did it, folks. We got to the end, and as usual, links will always be in the show notes so you can read it yourselves. If me reading it to you wasn't, like, painful enough, you can go read it for yourself. But to kind of sum this up, like, there is a discussion to be had here, somewhat. But what my ideal discussion would be is to not lump people into groups based on some character traits, either real or imagined. But there is an argument here against toxic masculinity and toxic femininity that says that we should be viewing people as individuals and not as groups of people to label. And that is really where I would rather have seen this gone. But even if you wanted to make these arguments, you don't have to engage in hyperbole to make your arguments. Like, you don't have to use the most extreme examples that you could possibly think of to make your argument, because then it's obvious when somebody reads it, and it just kind of makes people, like, it turns people off. Like, you're not, like, obviously if you're going for, like, the extreme, the shock value, people are going to tune out anything that might be useful that you're saying. So that's where I'm at with this. And going forward, like, obviously, I am a libertarian. I view people as individuals. I don't view people as groups based by race or gender or age or anything like that. I try to view people as individuals. And I think that, if anything, should be the takeaway from me on this piece, is just don't engage in this idea of toxic masculinity or toxic femininity, because everybody is different. Every individual is different. Everybody has their own motivations. And to ascribe motivations to somebody without knowing them is just, it's not a nice thing to do. So, yeah. All right. Gonna go ahead and wrap this up because this has gone way, 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 way longer than I planned. But if you made it this far, thank you. And as always, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Take care, and until next time.